I want to just start with RTB in general. So RTB has been growing incredibly, as we saw from the video there. What's so great about it? Why is RTB the way to go, and why is everyone diving into it?
We own and operate a very large exchange business, which includes our own RTB engine. We have data centers in Europe and in Singapore and majority in the US. But what we've seen from a publisher vantage point is sort of 2.5 years ago, 20% of publishers' revenue is generated through exchange-traded media. Today in our network, it's upwards of 60, in some cases 70+% of publishers' revenue is generated through exchange-traded media. And because I think data has gotten much more, or the ability to understand data has gotten much more sophisticated from a marketer point of view. They're able to find the right audience in the right context and buy that ad. And because we work with mostly the internet that we all visit but are not brand names, so we work mostly with comScore 1001 and the rest of the internet. That benefits our publisher base a lot because you're not having to buy, like, I don't need to buy the Wall Street Journal. I can go buy Fred Wilson's blog and find that exact same person using the data attributes. So we've seen it as a massive uplift from our publisher's vantage point.
Anyone else want to venture in on RTB?
Sure. I mean, I think programmatic or RTB, if you think about it, there's a reason that 1 in every $4, I think, is a projection is going to be spent that way. And it does go back to data. You know, it takes the waste away. And I don't necessarily think that happens at the cost of the Wall Street Journal. I think in a lot of ways it can enhance quality publications. But there's a need in the marketplace. There is 65 million websites in the world, 50 million added every year. So if you think about how we used to buy, can't do it anymore, right? There's a need to buy programmatically. And now that we've got the infusion of data and the ability to decide who those individuals are, what they mean to us, and then understand how they interact with other media, it gives marketers an advantage that they haven't had before. It gives them the ability to take the guesswork away and understand, okay, if I spend X, I expect X in return. And I think the more that we can do that, it'll be a benefit. But I don't think it's at the expense of quality publishers. I don't think it's at the expense of sales individuals who articulate the value of their brand or their content. I think all those things live and breathe. But the reason's efficiency, the reason's data, I think those are the two that lead the charge. And accountability as well, because before, if you ran a quality publisher, it would be, well, of course, here's what my audience shows. Right? Here's what the ABC figures were. Now we have data that's real time that tells who that individual was and what they look like and what they did. So it gives us a lot more advantages than we ever have.
And you're obviously buying there not only in Walter's 1001 and on, but in the 1000 and up.
Absolutely. I mean, we span across the entire ecosystem. So like I said, there's 65 million websites. There's value to the ones that are legitimate, but understanding who the user is, right? And understanding, if we think about attributes, what the end action we're trying to get out of that particular interaction, that's key. Yeah. So it may be a situation where large impact branding, it's important to be able to do, but that requires the ecosystem to be able to provide valuable content, valuable impressions to them. So yeah, it could be every site has a legitimate site, has its purpose, it's how you interact with them.
So that's why RTB is great. So that's a great level set for the evening. Now let's take our first step into viewability. So what is viewability? I mean, the first time I heard it, it was about whether the ad's above the fold or below the fold, but it's obviously a lot more than that. One of you want to take a stab at that?
Yeah, sure. So I think that there's been a lot of talk around viewability probably the last 18, 24 months, and I think that the obvious statement is viewability is really, does the ad have an opportunity to be seen? It may be served above the fold, it may be served below the fold. Does it really present itself to a user, and a real user, not a fraudulent user in terms of somebody who's not a human, a robot, or somebody who's doing iframe stuffing? For us, from a viewability perspective, there's a lot of work being done towards standards, and we certainly support those standards. But I think one of the benefits that when you think about RTB and you think about programmatic trading, and I'll side with Walter here because he's the only publisher in the room, it represents a huge opportunity for buyers and for sellers, because naturally media that has a higher probability of showing ads to users does perform better, surprise, surprise. And advertisers who are able to actually show their ads to their intended target audience get better results. Being able to control how much you buy and what you buy from a viewability perspective allows you to actually fine-tune the attribution model.
And I would imagine that if we really solve for this, as John Battelle said earlier on, this is really going to help the people who are publishing on the internet. So, I mean, we hear about declines of revenues for newspaper publishers and others, but I would imagine this would really help them. Walter or Anne?
I mean, our research shows that about 54% of ads that are served online right now do not meet that opportunity to be seen standard. So if you imagine taking that amount of inventory out of the ecosystem, that makes the remaining inventory a lot more valuable and a lot more productive. So it does have a nice opportunity for publishers, but also for marketers and agencies to not waste their time with the stuff that's not going to work. And in RTB, I think one of the reasons why it's been so successful is because of the amount of time it took to process an insertion order and do those one-off buys with that large number of sites. By going to viewability, you also save time and save effort from not dealing with all these impressions that have no value at all.
Yeah.
And right now it's the majority of them.
You want to add anything to that, Walter?
So I don't know where to get the data from, but
The panel.
No, it's not the panel.
Oh, really? No.
It's comScore data, not the panel. It is it's billions and billions of impressions over the past year, run across thousands of campaigns.
Could actually be higher than that. There's some numbers that are 60%. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting, so in the publishers that we work with, they tend to be, we work with try to work with more of the 64,999,000, right? Not the 1,000 top biggest guys. And most of them are actually relatively unsophisticated, like newsflash, right? So these are, someone writes a site about yoga, like Yoga Journal. It's a magazine, it's a niche magazine, it's in our network, right? Yep. It gets 2 million people a month.
My wife reads it.
What's that? Right.
My wife reads it.
Right. So they care about creating and curating content related to yoga. They don't know or have any real notion about anything that we're talking about in this room. And so when we look at our network, we say, geez, they most often, from a standardized advertising perspective, run a leaderboard in a medium rectangle. And I'd say that our network, I don't have specific data on every single website, but just my human analysis is like 90% of that stuff is above the fold and viewable. But here's the problem. So we only work with a certain set of that 60 odd million, and until the broader publisher base adheres to what we're talking about here, it doesn't actually help anybody. So we've got publishers that, and we work closely with these guys, AdSafe guys, to try and figure out what type of activity is suspicious or not, or what's viewable or not, right? And until other publishers kind of belly up to the bar, it's very difficult for those CPMs to rise for publishers across the board. Yeah. Does that make sense?
But I think that's where the opportunity to coexist from a buy side and a sell side perspective comes into play, right? You guys on the sell side are doing a really good job of enforcing levels of viewability, enforcing the fact that you don't tolerate suspicious or fraudulent traffic on your exchange and on your networks. The buy side has the opportunity to enforce the same standards, and we provide those facilities on the demand side that allows people like you guys to say, hey, I don't want to buy ads that are out of view either. I don't want to buy ads that are fraudulent either. And if those
or where I can't figure, or I don't know what the URL is because it comes through as an obfuscated URL through an ad server.
Right, exactly. And the net out of that is that every impression has a value, right? Some of that might be zero if it's a fraudulent impression. Some of it might be $10, $20, maybe it might be $100. It really depends, and it's going to depend a lot on the buyer, and it's going to depend a lot on how much demand there is in the exchange environment for that particular impression. With RTB and the benefit of all the tools that buyers and sellers have using data to predict what the likelihood of that ad being in view or not suspicious is, allows you to dynamically price impressions. So we don't have to think about an IO where it says, look, will buy 100 million impressions from you at a $5 CPM and you promise 100 million uniques or whatever it might be, audience is certainly relevant. We're not negating anything about the fact that the person who you're trying to reach is extremely important, but the environment that you're reaching that audience is absolutely paramount to success. And premium publishers will benefit from all these standards that have been put into play. And with RTB, you can actually control them in real time.